Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do a sequel on the video that you guys have shown the most interest in, and that is my killer polyglot routine video, which I'm going to link up here. I never know exactly where to point, but it is somewhere up there. And for the people who have watched it but don't really remember what it's about, I'm going to do a small recap. I talk in that video about my core philosophy when it comes to learning languages and why I started to focus a lot on teaching myself a lot of the things that I have learned and why that has skyrocketed my learning. I also talked about how I developed my personal language learning routine and how you can do the same, cater to your own needs and likes, and what that language learning routine entails for me, so personally. So if you haven't checked out that video, definitely check it out because it talks a lot about the basics, and then you can come here and check out some of the advanced tips that I have for you when it comes to creating a polyglot routine. So speaking about this video, I want to talk about what you can do after you have acquired a good chunk of vocabulary in your target language. I am also going to be talking about how you can review that vocabulary at neck-breaking speed, and this is especially good for the people who always comment that they do not have enough time to do a bunch of vocabulary lists or to concentrate a ton in language learning. I promise that with the thing that I'm going to tell you, you're going to be very much able to review vocabulary at least hundreds of words in minutes. I absolutely promise you. One caveat is that you do have to invest in the language first in order to be able to do that, but we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So let's move on with the video. The first thing that I want to talk about is how you can review old vocabulary fast. The prerequisite to this though, and I know that this sounds a little bit like I tricked you, but at the end it's going to pay off, I promise, is that you are going to have to be somewhat familiar with the vocabulary that we're going to work with. However, when it comes to what we're going to do, we only need the very specific words. So number one, the words that are part of your passive vocabulary and that you've never been able to use in actual conversation. So we're going to try to make that passive vocabulary active vocabulary. And the second type of words that we want to concentrate on are those words that are on your vocabulary list, but you still have trouble remembering. So in order to elucidate all of this, I will show you from my personal vocabulary list how I identify those words. So because people have asked me before, the app that I use for my notes is Notability, but in essence what I basically do is that, as you can observe, it's somewhat faint in the screen, but as you can observe, there are plenty of words that I have underlined, and those are the words that I have the most difficult time with. So those are words that I have reviewed over and over again, and I haven't really been able to either integrate in my daily vocabulary, or they are words that I can recognize but I often forget that they even exist, you know. So when I see them, I'm like, oh right, that is how you say it, but I can't really summon the word when I am prompted by a hint. So what I do with all of those words that I have underlined is that I create a Word document and I basically start writing them all out in a column, and I start writing out paragraphs using all of those words. These paragraphs are quite interesting because they're in the form of stories, and I will show you an example a little bit later. So what this allows me to do is to see the word in context, and the idea behind this is that I can write really dense paragraphs that are conformed of all the words that I'm constantly getting wrong. And the only thing that I need to do with these paragraphs really is to read them, which takes a minute in comparison to reviewing flashcards, which takes a lot longer. So as an example, guys, I'm going to read to you this teeny tiny little paragraph from the English section so that we can all understand. And I'm going to be telling you my internal monologue as I read it. So it says, during these trying times, which is an expression in English, we need to keep tabs on our responsibilities. Another expression, right now we must not shun our duties, although you might think that you would enjoy more a hot, languorous afternoon eating ice cream at the park. The reality is that right now that kind of attitude is deplorable. So all of the words that are bolded are basically words that I failed to learn, basically. And the good thing about here is that because I'm already familiar with the words, I sort of know what they are about. The good thing about these paragraphs is that I can see the word in context. So for example, to be languorous essentially means to be idle. Although you might think that you'd enjoy more a hot, languorous afternoon eating ice cream at the park, that basically describes a very idle scene in comparison to what you should be doing, which is taking care of your responsibilities, which is the opposite of being languorous. So in that way, even though I'm not looking at the definition of languorous, I sort of understand what the word is about just from the context of this story. And I am going to tell you now how to create paragraphs or sentences that make sense like that when you are learning a language, or when you want to do this with vocabulary words of languages that you are not super advanced in. So looking at the Catalan section, which is a language that I'm just starting to learn, there is a big difference between the paragraphs that I create for the English section and the sentences that I create for the Catalan section. And that difference is that for the most part, unless I'm being lazy, I create all of the paragraphs and I, think of a story and I integrate all of those words in the English part, or with the English vocabulary. But with the Catalan vocabulary, I just go straight out to sample sentences on any reference. So for example, I just use Glosby, which is basically a Catalan Spanish dictionary, and they provide so many sample sentences, and I just basically copy and paste them into this Word document. And what I would do is that instead of reading paragraphs, I would just read those sample sentences. The reason I would suggest for you to use sample sentences instead of writing out paragraphs, if you are doing this with a language that you are not super advanced in, is because the sample sentences, if they're coming from a dictionary, are not going to make any grammatical mistakes or anything like that. And by reading them, you will get used to the syntax and the way that the verbs are placed and the ways that they use expressions, for example, which are also included in the sample sentences. But if you're a little bit more advanced in the language, like for example my case in French or English, I would suggest for you to write your own paragraphs, because you are already familiar with the syntax and the structure of the language, so you can very easily insert new vocabulary if you know what the word means. And this will of course make you so much better at writing. So for example, this was actually my first time writing something in Portuguese, because I didn't really learn the language in a classroom. I learned it through YouTube videos, so I never really got the chance to write any sort of essays or paragraphs as homework. So this was really my first experience writing Portuguese, and to be honest, it was so much easier than I expected it to be. And I actually would encourage you to do that if you have a good grasp of the language and the structure, but you haven't really written anything. Just give it a try. It is so much easier than you think it's going to be. So now onto the actual challenge, guys. I am going to be reading a document where I have identified 50 words that were in my previous vocabulary list, and I'm going to see how long it takes me to review all of those 50 words. So guys, that was a total of 1 minute and 50 seconds for reviewing 50 words. And just to prove that it is actually very useful to utilize stories, because your brain just absorbs everything like a sponge, I will recite 10 of the words that are actually in bold in that document and that I actually remember. So I remember Paco like package, chinarsi like to bend, to kneel, I guess, sconfiggere, to beat somebody in a fight, diffondere, like to disperse news. I remember sprecare, to waste, panateria, giornalissimo, which is journalism. Oh my god. Manchia, which is like or manchia, I'm not sure, which is a stain. Manica, which is a sleeve. So she had a stain in her sleeve. That was like what I wrote about. That 8, I forgot. Okay, 8. Let's suppose. What else? Let me remember. Ginasta. e puzzare. Puzzare means to smell bad. So see, like I remember, at least like from what I'm saying, 20% of the words that I learned, and that really speaks to the fact that I'm able to memorize those words way faster from just reading that in 2 minutes. So that's what 2 minutes can do. And back to what I was saying at the beginning about investing in the language. Yes, it is very time consuming to create all of these documents. Yes, it is very time consuming to do or make all of the lists. I mean, like this has taken me 6 months, what I showed you in Audibility. But if you invest in the language, you will be able to reap what you sow. So what I mean by that is that now I can read all of this vocabulary that I've been archiving for the last 6 months, and that it took me a little bit to reorganize, probably a day or two on this Word document, probably a little bit more actually than that. But after that, I will have this document for the rest of my life, and the only thing that I will need to do is to read it. And that is not going to take me more than 20 minutes if I read, like, say, 10 pages of vocabulary. Or not vocabulary, but 10 pages of stories that I've made of super dense paragraphs catered to my own needs and my own, faults. Right? So that's what I want you to learn from this video. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making this video for some reason. I don't know why. I think that it is so interesting to be talking about new forms of making vocabulary learning more efficient. And another thing that I would like to say is to follow my playlist down below and my Instagram, especially my playlist. I think that they will be very helpful for you because I have around 1,000 songs per language. And for those people who don't or can't find songs in the languages that they're trying to learn, they might find one of the languages that they're learning in my playlist, and I have a ton of songs. So follow them if you want. They are absolutely free. I mean, like, they're on Spotify, and I will see you next week. Bye guys.